are two essential things that everybody yearns for. Today I want to talk about those two things, and I want to talk about how we can find them. I'm going to introduce them to you in a way with a few pictures in just a moment, in a way that I saw somebody talk about this in Boston not very long ago when I was there for a talk. So I'm going to show you this first picture, if you can put it on the screen. I hope you can see it. I want you to think, what is this person telling to the world about herself? What is she saying to the world? Just think about that for a second and call out some things that you think she may be saying. I'm different. I'm independent.
Confident.
I'm confident. All right, some judgment in there. I stand out, right? I'm unique. I'm different. I dance to a different drummer. Maybe look at me. I want to be seen. So, someone who's saying, I don't conform to the society as a whole. I'm a little different. I've got my own way of being, my own ideas, and sort of announcing that to whoever sees her. Now, I'm just curious, if this is Saturday night, where do you think she's going to go when it gets dark in the evening? To a club, to a dance hall, to a concert, where she's going to be with a whole bunch of people who look just like her. These are two things that we all deeply desire: to be seen for who we are as an individual, and to belong to a group or some kind of a community. We all want to be seen for the unique, incredible, amazing, different person that we are, and we want to belong. And so the things that we do or wear or say or buy, or the organizations that we connect ourselves to, all help us to tell a story about who we are. We are a storytelling creature. We love to tell stories. We're constantly telling stories to ourselves and to the world about who we are. So look at this next picture and tell me, what story do you think this product is going to help some guy who purchases it to tell the world? What? Any thoughts? Power, sure. Freedom. I'm different. I'm invincible. I'm willing to take risks. I'm a little bit of a rebel. I like to live on the edge a little bit, maybe. I'm free. I like to have the wind blowing through my hair. Even if I'm a button-up kind of guy 5 days a week, that's not all of who I am. You see, I don't want to be too gender stereotypical here, but men sometimes go to great lengths and do some pretty foolish things to try to express who they are, even things sometimes that can be harmful to our bodies and that do not make a lot of sense. But before we pick too much on the guys, let's look at what many women do that might be considered foolish, harmful to their bodies, doesn't make a lot of sense, in order to make a statement to the world. Let's show the last slide here. All right, so I just want to, I don't mean to be stereotypical, but I just want to say this is a universal quality that we all really do want to be seen. We all do want to tell stories about ourselves, and we buy things, we wear things, we do things, and we join organizations, in part to tell ourselves and the world who we are. We're storytellers. So I want to ask you a question. I mean, one of the things that I think is really interesting and important about All Souls is that it allows us to come and still be an individual, retain our individual beliefs, cultures, and other things, but also belong to a community. And, however, let's consider what being associated with All Souls might say about you. I'm going to venture a few guesses. It probably says, I'm not a fundamentalist Christian like so many in Oklahoma. I don't believe the universe is only 6,000 years old. I don't believe that the Bible is the unerring, literal Word of God, or that men are supposed to be above women. in the social order of things, or that Christianity is the one and only true religion that everybody ultimately must try to and come to believe in. Saying you're part of All Souls might tell the world that. It might say, I care about society and I care about the environment. It might say, I'm open-minded. I'm a free thinker. I may belong to a religious community, but I think for myself. I believe in making this world a better place, this world, not waiting for some world to come. All of those may be things. I think I'm fairly safe assuming that if you're a part of All Souls, that you reflect some, if not all, of those characteristics. But do you really think that when you tell people out in the world, in our wider Oklahoma community, that you're a part of All Souls, that's what they think immediately? Maybe not, right? I'll take that from your laughter, that maybe not. Do you think that when you tell people, I'm a member of All Souls Unitarian Church, or I attend All Souls Unitarian Church, that these people immediately say, oh, that's that fantastic church that courageously helped lead the community through the civil rights movement and the integration of the public schools and restaurants and accommodations, and that continues to be a positive force for good in the community? Is that what most people think immediately when you say that? Or even though it's all true, it's probably not what people think immediately when we say we're a part of All Souls. Do you think they say, or what do you think they say when you say, I bring my children to All Souls? They say, oh, that's that really cool church that does not indoctrinate the children into religious dogmas and superstitions, that uses its Sunday school to spark their children's imagination and curiosity about the important matters of faith and truth and justice. That's the church that does not try to stamp their minds onto their children, but rather teaches them how to think in moral, ethical, and compassionate ways. The Sunday school that does not teach their children to fear hell and devils and demons, and does not teach them that their religion is superior to all others, but rather teaches their children that all the world's religions and cultures are filled with beauty and with wisdom, and that we can learn from men and women of all eras and all lands. Or you think that's what they think when you tell them you bring your kids? Maybe not. I see some heads shaking. So maybe not. Maybe not. That's not the first thing that comes into people's minds. Or do you think that people say, oh, that's the church, unlike 95% of churches across America that continue to follow down the trend that Martin Luther King spoke about 50 years ago, that Sunday morning in America is the most segregated hour of the week, 11 o'clock Sunday morning. And that church is continually growing as an intentional multicultural community that more and more reflects the beauty and the blessed diversity of our country and our world. Is that what they think first? Or that's the church that gives away its offering every week to folks who need it the most. And people probably don't know that about our inexhaustible outreach to 3 of Tulsa's most in-need public schools, or the outreach we do to the homeless, or for affordable housing that we raised money for today, or the microcredit loan programs that we sponsor throughout Central America, or the orphanage and school that we support in Uganda. And you can learn about a lot of this stuff today in our activities fair. Or I doubt they even know about our in-reach that we have, where members of our church and ministers go out and visit people in hospitals, in their homes, in nursing homes, and bring prayer shawls knitted by our own members to those who are sick, wounded, and bereaved, and bring little blankets and booties knitted by our members to newborn babies in our congregation. Or that we have an entire choir that's purpose is to sing to the dying. It's probably not the first thing that people think when they think of All Souls, but wouldn't it be nice if those are the kinds of things that the name All Souls conjured up in people's minds around this community? That's one of the projects that I've taken upon myself this year, is to try to help us to do a better job of communicating who we are, what we do, and why it matters. And in a little while, I'm going to share with you some information I've already gathered that's pretty inspiring, at least to me, and I hope to you, in this effort. But first, I want to tell you a few stories about who we are that helps to explain some of the challenges that we have and that we'll probably always have that will make it difficult for a church like ours to maintain a broadly popular reputation in the wider community, especially a community like Tulsa, Oklahoma. The reason that I want to share these stories with you is because this is who we are. And we need to know that so that we never put our reputation above our mission and our vision. In 1973, 10 years after the federal courts and the government made racial integration of public schools the law of the land, Tulsa still had not integrated its public schools. In fact, the superintendent of Tulsa Public Schools at the time, Dr. Mason, said he was trying to reassure the constituents of this city that he was not going to follow the federal law and bring about the dreaded racial integration in this community. He said to the people, don't worry, I don't even know what the word integration means. That week in the sign out in front of All Souls, it announced the sermon topic that our now Minister Emeritus, Dr. Wolf, was to deliver that Sunday, which was titled, The Last Days of Dr. Mason. And in his sermon from this very pulpit to this congregation, he eloquently and extensively filleted the superintendent of public schools and said in plain English, and I quote, "Any superintendent of schools who does not know what the word integration means is incompetent and needs to be fired." And he announced to the congregation that he was going to be going to the school board meeting that Tuesday evening to make himself and those ideas known to them, and he invited the entire congregation to join him in that effort. Now on Monday, the Tulsa World printed that sermon starting on the front page in its entirety. And on Tuesday, Dr. Wolf, many members of this congregation, and many members of the wider community stormed to the school board meeting, made their case, and by the end of that meeting, Dr. Mason resigned. Now we celebrate that history now, but at the time that it was happening, it was not particularly popular in the wider community of Tulsa. Many Tulsans thought that Dr. Wolf and this church was leading our community down a slope of moral degradation and social decline. But we've never placed popularity over doing and saying what we believe is right and what we believe is just. So we will always have that working against us with regard to a broad sense of popularity in Oklahoma, because that's who we are, and hopefully that will never change. Now, when Dr. Wolf and others fought for women's equality and reproductive rights, same kind of reaction throughout this community. And over the past 13 years, as this church and I have been outspoken for racial justice and the equality of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people, it has not always been popular. When we led the charge a few years ago against the mayor and others on the Park and Recreation Board who wanted to put a biblical creationism exhibit in the Tulsa Public Schools alongside the evolution exhibit, it was controversial in many parts of this city, and it was seen by some as that we were anti-Christian. It wasn't anti-Christian, it was just pro-common sense and pro-constitution. When I spoke out against the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq right after September 11th, it was not popular at that time. Now, last Sunday when I spoke out against bombing of Syria, I was surprised to find out that was actually a popular opinion, which was different for me. When I defended Barack Obama's minister, the Reverend Jeremiah Wright, when he was running for election back in 2008, because that minister's reputation was being unfairly and publicly assassinated in the media, that was unpopular. And for many in the religious community of Tulsa, when we opened our doors to Bishop Carlton Pearson and the New Dimensions congregation, that was unpopular. So since we have strong convictions about freedom and justice and love, All Souls has often found itself on the leading edge or the cutting edge, or some people think over the edge of public opinion. From a long view, what's happened consistently is that the positions that have been taken from this pulpit and in this church, such as racial equality, women's equality, separation of church and state, gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender equality, and the unpopular stance that were taken against the Vietnam War, the Afghanistan War, and the Iraq War, have all become the general consensus of the culture. But at the time, we were out on a limb making a case and standing up and sticking our necks out and going against the wisdom, the conventional wisdom, and even some people would argue the morals of our times. When I was just a toddler, my parents were members of a Unitarian church north of Chicago in Deerfield, Illinois, and my dad tells a story he'll never forget of a time when the Black Panthers came and wanted to speak. This was a highly volatile time in the life of America, and the Black Panthers were already being just slayed in the media for what they were doing. They were famous for carrying guns, loaded weapons, visibly into African American neighborhoods around the country to protect African Americans from police brutality. And they were wanting to speak around the country to let people know what they really stood for, because what the media was saying they stood for was not necessarily reflective of who they thought they were. So they couldn't find a place to speak north of Chicago. So they figured, well, we'll ask the Unitarians and see if they'll let us speak. And you can imagine there were some heated discussions in the church among the leaders about whether they were going to let that happen or not. But in the end, they came down on the side to say, we stand for freedom of speech. We believe it's important to have open debate on the important issues of our times. And so they allowed the Black Panthers to rent the church as a hall to speak to the community. The neighbors didn't like it. There were threats made. And my dad was actually recruited with a number of other men in the church to be security for that evening around the church when the Black Panthers came to speak. Some other things that I want you to know about some of our churches. If you remember from India and the independence fight, Nehru, who worked alongside Gandhi, Nehru, at the Community Unitarian Church in New York City, they have a desk that was Nehru's desk back when he was alive. He gifted it to the Community Unitarian Church there in New York because of the strong support and vocal support that he was given in the United States by John Haynes Holmes, who also traveled to India to meet him and to help them to organize and strategize about their movement. And so he was given this gift of this desk from Nehru because of the work that he did to help the Indians fight against the British for their own freedom. And also that church is famous because they gave an office to the African National Congress of Nelson Mandela way back in the time when Mandela was still considered a communist and a criminal by most people around the world, and certainly within the United States. They gave their first United States office to the African National Congress in the basement of the Community Unitarian Church of New York. And that's why after Mandela was freed and became president, every time he came to New York to speak at the United Nations, he always stopped in and spoke at the Community Unitarian Church of New York because he felt a deep well of gratitude for that congregation for what they did for him and his community back in the days when nobody would believe in him. Now, they did get bomb threats. The church got bomb threats back in that era, but fortunately nothing happened like what happened in Birmingham. And we have to remember that today is the 50th anniversary of the death of 4 African American girls when there was a bombing of a black church in Birmingham, Alabama. So I think it's worthwhile to take a moment just to reflect on the kinds of things that were going on when Dr. Wolf was talking about Dr. Mason and this church was taking stands. Churches were being bombed and children were being killed. And today's the 50th anniversary of that. So I guess my point is that this is the tradition that we come from. This is the tradition of this church. This is the tradition that we are called on in our place and time to continue and to move forward and to make sure that the light of freedom and justice that this church and this tradition represents is never put out, but continues to be passed on from generation to generation, part of the long march of freedom that can never be forgotten, and the story needs to continually be told and retold to every generation. And so I just want to take this opportunity to mention that this Saturday here at the church, All Souls has given its building to the Tulsa Interfaith Alliance for their annual luncheon. We've done that before, but the speaker this time is a very controversial figure in America right now, and I just want you to know this because you'll probably be hearing about this out in the media and the community. Last week, we were informed that on Saturday, in order to get into our church, they're going to where everyone's going to have to go through metal detectors or be wanded in order to get in. And actually, after we were told that was a precondition of his coming to speak here, we were asked if we wanted to renege on our offer to host the event. The speaker is Mikey Weinstein, who's a leader of an organization called the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. He's an honor graduate of the United States Air Force. He spent 10 years as a military attorney. He also served as legal counsel for President Ronald Reagan. And 6 members of Mr. Weinstein's family are graduates of the U.S. Air Force, including his 2 sons, his daughter-in-law and a son-in-law. And he's been outspoken on ways in which he sees a very dangerous deterioration of the separation of church and state and a willingness to allow people to proselytize within the United States military. And he's since been deemed by those in the far religious right to be, they call him Satan's lawyer, and the field general of the godless armies of Satan. So it ought to be interesting. So his topic is dealing with an amendment that is before the United States Congress that would allow military personnel to proselytize, and apparently, according to him, there's a lot going on that's very unhealthy and very detrimental to both our national security and our military forces. So he was quoted in the paper yesterday as saying, and you can tell he's a colorful speaker, he said, the effect of this amendment would be to allow every bigoted slimeball within the American armed forces, the homophobes, the Islamophobes, the anti-Semites, the misogynists, the anti-constitutionalists, fundamentalist, denominationalists, Christians, to be given absolute free rein to slither out their slinking closets of putrid prejudice and spout their twisted Christian jihad poison. So there you have it. You're thinking, what am I doing here Sunday morning? That's going to be a lot more interesting. So apparently metal detectors are required any time he speaks anywhere around the country because of all the threats that he's had against his life because of his advocacy for the First Amendment. So it is possible that we as a congregation will once again receive some negative publicity as people don't always know how to distinguish, or they're not able to distinguish something that happens at All Souls, might be a rental or something like that, or the position of the church itself. And that is a risk I believe that we need to take over and over and over and over again to make sure that issues that are important in this society get debated and that we never shy away from taking those kinds of risks. And I'll say to visitors this morning, because I know this is September, this is sort of church shopping season. People come and they're looking for churches, and we always see new faces in September, and I see some lovely new faces out there today. And if you're looking for a church that's contemporary, courageous, passionate, and engaged, you're going to like it here. But if you place broad social respectability over moral purpose, then you probably want to shake my hand as you're making your way out of the service and then keep on church shopping. There are plenty of safe, friendly, traditional churches, wonderful. They're all on every corner of this community. That's not what this church has been or is, and I think it's important that we share that right up front. And today's a day when we invite people to join, and if you're ready to join and say, sign me up, we invite you also to come forward after the service and join our church here on the chancel and sign our covenant and become a part of All Souls. We also, for those who are members who haven't signed the vision statement that we have for our centennial in 2021, out in the foyer today and throughout this month, we have an opportunity for those who are members who have not signed the vision statement to be able to sign it. You'll see it beautifully displayed up on the wall, and you can sign that today also. Now, with that said, let me share with you some words that we've heard about this church. We actually went out and asked some professionals to review the church, review the religious landscape of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and America. And we asked them to let us know kind of where we fit and what our future looks like and what they would recommend. Now, these experts I'm talking about is a company called Walsh and Associates. They're actually branding professionals, considered by many, they just won an award as best in Tulsa. But as branding professionals, their expertise includes helping organizations to define their core purpose and help them share that core purpose with the world. Now, what you're about to hear are some really positive things, despite the tears and warning. But but and they might make you cry too, but these are really positive things that you're going to hear. But I want you to know that's not, I want to put this in context, because we didn't pay them to tell us positive things. That's not what they're about. That's not what this kind of work is about. Their job is not to tell us what we want to hear. Their job is to tell us the truth so that we can figure out, considering what's going on, what does that mean for us and how do we move forward as an organization? So for example, if we were one of the mainline Christian congregations of this community, let's say like the Southern Baptists, they would begin by saying something like, you've been bleeding 18,000 members a year for a decade, and that trend seems to be continuing, so then we would recommend you move forward in this way or that way. So that's their job. And here's what they had to say about All Souls after talking to 6 diverse members of our congregation, interviewing them, coming to a couple of our services, reading our history book, and then doing the kind of market analysis, if you will, on religious life in America today and in Oklahoma. They wrote, now perhaps more than ever, people are confused, disenfranchised, disillusioned, and even angry about the way they feel they've been mandated, instructed, and forced into thinking about their world and about people, God, and spirituality. This world is now connected in a way for the first time in history that allows us to share in other people's cultures, beliefs, happiness, pain, ideas, and even persecutions like never before. People are therefore questioning traditional creeds, what they mean, and the impact that they have on humanity and on community and our connections with one another and on our collective future. All Souls' vision aligns with how more and more people see their world, their place in it, and how many people today view other cultures and their own spiritual nature. And All Souls' vision aligns with how more and more people see the impact that religious teachings and actions should have on humanity. They went on to say that this is not a passing trend, but rather this is a long-term trajectory of our culture and our world. In other words, they're saying this is our time. Never before has the world or American culture been more ready for or in tune with the values and perspectives that we have to offer. But we also must look at the facts that as American culture is shifting more and more towards greater inclusion and equality, those who feel they are losing power and prestige in this new reality are becoming even more angry and even more entrenched. So in a sense, there's what might be called a culture war in America between those who are angry because they see the traditional distribution of power, prestige, and privilege is changing, and they feel like they're going to lose out. And on the other side, people are angry. And I've been reading theologian Matthew Fox, who explains that many young people, especially today, are looking at America, and the way they see it, they're inheriting a lot of debts. Not just unheard of educational debts, because never has a generation come out of school with so much debt on their shoulders, but the debts of foolish wars and the debts of a depleted earth, which includes the loss of so much beauty and richness and variety of species and the deteriorating health of the planet. And they feel that they are inheriting an ineffective, corporate entrenched political system and an outdated and ineffective religious systems. And so there's a lot of anger out there on both sides. And we all know that anger is a stage of grief. There's a lot of grief out there about what's happening in our world and what's happened and what world we're inheriting and handing on to our children. So the question is, what does our church have to offer people who are angry and grieving? Now, Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., Dorothy Day, and the women of Seneca Falls have shown us that we can channel our anger into real powerful change for good. And that's what all the subversive sages across time and culture have tried to do, whether it was Socrates or Lao Tzu or the Buddha or Jesus. They all saw the problems of their culture and the conventional wisdom, the problems of the conventional wisdom of their times, and they suggested that we take a road less traveled. They taught the importance in unjust times of following a way that defies convention. Some people don't realize that this is what the church is supposed to do. The church has become an instrument of the state in so many ways, and an instrument of the culture, as opposed to offering a different kind of view. People have forgotten or were never taught that Jesus advocated for an alternative social vision in his times. As Marcus Borg and many other Christian theologians have outlined, Jesus proclaimed a new way of living, and he broke down the social barriers between people. He was famous for inviting everybody, male and female, rich and poor, prostitutes and tax collectors, around his meal table. He was a social reformer. Talk about controversial. Jesus was an intense critic of his society. He attacked the Romans for their oppressive political dominance, and he confronted the priests of Israel for betraying the essence of their faith. Jesus questioned the dominant values, attitudes, and expectations of his culture, and he provided an alternative vision of how to live. And that's the work of the church. And so he, like all the great sages of his time, call us to also be critical of the dominant values, attitudes, and expectations of our culture, and to embrace something different, the spirit of love. And what is justice but a form of love? And what is compassion but a form of love? And what is a desire to see all people treated equally but love? Anger about the way things are can be debilitating and alienating, and it can block people from actually living fully into who they are. But when it is channeled properly, anger can be turned into love and can become a fuel for creating a better world. May all souls help us to turn our anger and our grief into love. May it continue to offer us and the community a vision of a new way of living and being. Not just in words, but we're doing it. We're living it inside these walls. A place where people can come as individuals and bring all of who they are, their beliefs, their cultures, their truths, their doubts, while also being a part of a community of meaning. It's quite a story that we have to tell. And I hope that being a part of All Souls helps you tell a story about something significant about who you are. And I hope that here, you always feel seen and heard and known, and that here, you always feel that you belong. I love you. Amen.